Hi, this is Kurt Doolittle, the gang for the Institute of Natural Law. This is our staff meeting on January 27th, 2022. All right, I'm going to pull my notes up here. Okay.
And really from games to money to what I do now is all just a process of exploring human incentives.
Correct. It's all the same, right?
Incentives, yeah, it's all just the study of incentives.
And so I tell people, I learned how to manage people playing Dungeons and Dragons because it's just managing their incentives if you want to keep them entertained, right? And then what is a CEO really doing? You're just managing incentives. And when I got involved in the libertarian movement and the Mises Institute, I'm talking to them and I'm like, well, I use this stuff. Austrian economics is a really bad term. What you mean is it's basically economic science, which is the science of human cooperation, which if you look at praxeology, it's just this. It's just the operational analysis of incentives, right? And so, it just, can you think in incentives instead of habits, right? Or norms? Can you think in those? Can you think in incentives? And so when I used to design games, right? It's all about providing the user with incentives. Right? And so when I look at my product over saying Runcible, what is it? It's an incentive engine.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I tell people it looks like an application, but it's really this application sitting on top of a game engine that records transactions to a financial system.
Well, that's funny because I was just going to say that all the game is an incentive engine with a statefulness database attached to it, and all commerce is an incentive engine with a transactional database attached to it.
Exactly.
All we're doing is marrying the two.
Exactly.
We're adding statefulness and transaction to the same database and running an incentive engine on top of it.
So that's the difference. A status engine is operational, and the accounting system and the economic system are not. They're aggregational.
Right.
So we do full accounting in state transitions and operationalism, right? And crypto does a full accounting. In other words, whereas aggregates always launder information. So that's my view of crypto. And it's like, well, the state's going to win anyway. All right. But we actually need this shit because it's the way we dominate the state. because the minute you have crypto, laundering becomes visible.
Right.
It becomes not only visible to people, it becomes visible in the state. Because you know what happens, what they call the general fund. Right? That just means you're giving people money they can spend at their will, right, in a government, instead of sending the population bills for services they'd asked for, right, and then paying them off when they're done. But you notice they raise a tax for a thing, but the tax never ends.
Yeah, we want government. We want them voting in private and transacting in public.
Exactly.
And people right now, we've got it the other way around, and people think that gives us power over government because we can see how they vote, but it's wrong. We want to be able to audit them.
Yes.
And we want them to be able to vote so they can't sell their receipts. So they got to vote in private, because otherwise right now they're public voted. They can actually sell that as a receipt to whoever wants to buy them. So just flip those two and we're good.
So I got my incentives the same way you did. Basically, right? Yeah. All right. Brandon got his from training dogs and learning that people are the same. Well, it's not really true. You train dogs, you train children, right? Or kids, right? Right. I mean, it's the same thing. And Brandon got it from like, what the fuck is going on here? How your transition is one of the most Martin's transition is one of the most fun transitions because you used to sort of be on the other side, right?
Yeah.
And so what just for humor, what made you decide that something was wrong?
Well, I wasn't getting the results that were predicted by the model. So I went through the Peterson pipeline, Sargon,
Yep.
And then farther and farther right until I got here.
Yep. And now you're like,
From a certain point of view,
I just think it's funny that you're like the one of the best guys in this field. It's, I mean, if you're, I mean, you're the guy closest to me that we have, right? And you went from the other side, right? I mean, I just think that's funny, right? I mean, if you could make that whole journey, it just is. I don't know why that's ironic to me. It's just because I always am a humor. I always find this bit of humor in the being human. The human condition is that we're just trying to not be stupid, right? I mean, it's just that's what being human is like. It's just trying not to be stupid, and we're so happy when we're not.
Well, I could say since I've attacked the issues from all sides, I've got them surrounded now.
Yes, you've what?
I've got them surrounded now.
Yes. All right. Okay, so I was just doing that for fucking warm up. What's the goddamn question? All right. Okay, so crazy rapid change. Let's talk about what the fuck is this? Okay, realize, guys, I'm an idiot. Okay, I don't understand popular anything. I don't have to remind you, you know, because you make fun of me all the time about it. So, so what is the thing on Gab between the, what do you call them? I guess Gab is a white thinks they're a white. The Gab community thinks they're a white nationalist community. Is that what I think? And then you have the Nick Fuentes and the AF, whatever AF stands for, America First, and they're the Catholics. Now, we got sort of beat up by these two groups. I mean, to me, most of the hostility came from Nick Fuentes' groups, right, and a couple of others. And so, why? If you haven't been on Gab, you don't know this, but Gab has donated or contributed to America First in order to get these guys on the platform. And I don't really care so much as that I had no idea this animosity existed. Does anybody know about this sort of conflict at all? Can you help me understand it?
I've only seen a screenshot today.
Okay, so you don't, this isn't something you guys, see, you're supposed to know the pop culture stuff.
We don't, I suppose I understand the conflict a little bit, but I see it as transferred aggression, meaning all of these groups have an angst and there's nowhere to place it other than those who can work inside of their context. So I don't get involved in problems that don't get, in conflicts that don't get solved. These are perpetual conflicts to distract people from what's going on.
Safe fights.
Safe fights. That's a good way to put it. Yeah, smart.
Oh, beautiful. Okay, so I just didn't understand what was going on there. What I've noticed though is that while you were starting to have there's an element on Gab where you can have adult conversations that you can't have on Twitter or Facebook or whatever. And the introduction of these people is doing the same as expected. It's pissing on those conversations because this Fuentes group uses the left's tactics of GSSRM. Canceling, undermining, doxing. So since they use this strategy, you know, it looks like suicide for to me, for the Gab community.
There's a problem in here. Martin made the point that, or you made the point that we were searching for knowledge, this pipeline to search for knowledge. That's people like us. That's what we're doing. And most people are searching for association.
Correct.
And they're picking teams, and then they're getting in conflicts because they're on those teams. So they're not
okay, so that goes back to the identities issue, is that they're searching for people with shared intuitions, not trying to solve problems.
Right.
Okay. So that's just a normal behavioral thing we should expect, but
they're poorly prioritizing enemies.
Yeah, okay, great idea.
They should be aligning against bigger enemies rather than fighting.
I mean, we all do that. I mean, I do that. I mean, it's way easier to criticize someone who's 2 degrees different from you
That's what I mean by safe
and
fights.
shares your frame
Right.
than somebody who's 180 degrees different from you,
But
and you
that
don't even have the same frames.
2 degrees is the efficacy of that fight as well. So
Yeah, yeah. So it's pointless, is what you're saying.
that is what I'm saying.
So we go back to that goes back to what Brad and I were covering in the last meeting, which is I was trying to make the point that identities are systems of measurement, and systems of measurement that correspond to our genetic intuitions, which together they form our incentives. And so it's important to produce new identities in order to create a positive system of measurement for people. The problem is that your need for an identity that's particular to you increases as your ability to adapt decreases. Does that make sense? And so that would mean that it's not possible. It's way easier on the left to create a homogeneous identity than it is on the right to create identities, which is why it's so important that the right maintain an upper class, right, that can provide leadership to the lower classes who will otherwise select individualistic identities that prevent group cohesion. All right. So basically, that's all there is to it, right? There's nothing else going on. So, but does it poison the, is it ever going to be possible to have an adult discourse for the little folk? Or is this just the reason I'm getting to this is it impossible? Is the only rational adult dialogue between the center right, the center, and the center left, because no other adult dialogue can happen? In other words, is that the only adult conversation? Because really a third of the population is in each category.
It looks to me like they're purposely disaffording for compatibility at the expense of their extinction. Like, if you'd like to be part of evolution in the future, like, you have to be compatible with those who exist currently.
Yes.
There's a certain amount of we can put limits and move people, train them to cooperate better, and afford them the methodology to separate where necessary. They have to work out their disputes, though, where they are, and they can't be over something that isn't decidable.
Yeah, the problem is each group's rally point is at a different point in the triangle.
Correct.
Right, coercion triangle, and so they're all rallying to their strengths, which means they're rallying to the group's weakness.
That's why we work to align them against the proper enemies.
Yeah.
Well, there's only so many solutions that exist at the the meta level. And that's where we're at. The largest factions that exist based on temperamental preference pools that pool predictively and have sped up the pooling process due to the internet, our ability to socialize with those who are of like mind.
Okay.
And it's compressed because we can't do that association offline. We're compelled to associate even where we would not. So
yeah, but how? Well, doesn't that mean they're going to kill every social platform, no matter what it is?
I see the emergence of all these new social platforms as the death of the social platforms, because you had everybody, and now you have everybody dispersing. So it's the affordance for coherence diminishing.
It's the natural. That's what I see. True. I mean, I agree. I don't say I see that. I said I agree with that provision. Because it's like it's just a natural life cycle of generalization to a commodity market, which then serves no one. All right, you provide a commodity. You build a. You have a plumbing shop, a carpenter shop, a lumber supply, an electrical shop in your town. You get a big box shop that supplies all of these, which then solves for the lowest price and the lowest quality, which then drives demand back up for quality that addresses each of the, and so that's the natural cycle that you go through. And so you end up with a big box that does the shit business and the specialty stores for talent. And that's what you end up
You
with.
mentioned cycles on Twitter the other day, and
Yes.
the way I see our work functioning is that it stops the cycles from being catastrophic.
Correct.
As you've reached towards the end of a cycle where typically catastrophe happens, that's when you error correct, right? And move to the next point in the cycle where there's a beginning without the catastrophe.
Yeah, and I mean, of course, good. I'm just trying to say, if I can is there anything I can add to that? The only thing I would say is that it also prevents the accumulation of divergences.
Oh, that's also the people we work with. When we converse with each other, it's not to disagree, it's to disambiguate and make coherent and meaningful the frames. And what you just said is that's true, but it's better. Yeah, it's always better because our solutions our solutions iterate forward reciprocally.
Right, we're solving for reciprocity and not for durable reciprocity rather than temporal pragmatism. In other words, cooperation rather than whatever you get away with at the moment. I just think it makes it easier to make, it's like increase in precision makes it easier to make decisions.
But it makes it harder to blame.
It makes it really hard to blame because it's very hard. It's harder. It's also very difficult to virtue signal.
Right.
All right. And so we eradicate both parts of it. Now, the problem is, can we make it understood? Which is my next question. Right.
Can we make it more valuable than virtue signaling? Right now, people value the virtue signaling. So
also, there's two topics that that are, I guess they're related. Maybe they're not. One is this issue of how to communicate it, because it just did a quick run through with Brad the other day, which I put up as the complete solution. And the other is, well, what's going on? Because the rate of change right now, I mean, we just hit the tipping point. I mean, the first week of January, I said, odd. I expected stuff to happen in January. And nothing's happening. I think that was on like the 11th, like the 7th, the 11th. I said, nothing's happening. I expected stuff to happen this month. Well, shit, stuff happened this month, right? So typically what happens in this cycle is that you get what we would call fascism, right? Which is fascism is defensive warfare, right? That's what it is, right? And so you're going to get a fascist turner, right? Now, I can't figure out what's going on, but I certainly see the left going fascist in what they consider defense. And I see the right, somebody said they see white nationalism or white identitarianism going mainstream very shortly. And does that make sense to you? Yeah. So I'm natural libertarian. Obviously, I'm creating a libertarian answer, which is libertarian just means voluntary cooperation. I'm solving for voluntary cooperation. This is, and I've positioned P-law, right, all along as a universal system. Even I said it was invented by us white folk, right? I mean, we didn't know what we were inventing, right? But it happened to end up with the optimum, which is basically scientific social system, social, political, economic system, which is basically reciprocity, which is basically natural law, which is basically the maximization of group evolutionary strategies, basically the maximization of evolutionary velocity, which is basically the maximization of evolution time. So, I mean, we stumbled on this stupid thing, and now we've got science and reason and medicine and technology and engineering, and we explore the stars and whatever really fast because we've got this thing. So, to me, I've got like, well, whiteness is just science. and that's all it is, and living by science and paying the tax of living by the science, or what the Greeks called living according to the laws of nature, right? So, I mean, I just saw it as creating a universal good like any other science.
I'm still
And
convinced it's just autism. It's just some cultural training on top.
say again?
I'm still convinced it's basically just autism with some cultural training on top.
Well, no, that what you're saying is the personality type that will pursue that is that, and we have more of that personality type, and that personality type tends to be responsible for every innovation that ever existed, so that was meaningful. So yeah, of course, but so what's the diff? All that means is autism is a bias towards science.
This is a bias towards law. Just use
Right.
the dog. I mean, they're undomesticated animals. They can act like animals within these limits. They
Yes.
demonstrate wanting to act like animals when given the opportunity. So you just limit the opportunity to things that don't get out of hand.
But that's what autism means, right? I mean,
Yeah,
it's
well,
like
yeah.
autism just means we're less biased by social and more biased by real, right? I mean, that's all it means, right? And to the point where we may forget the social. So,
When I
so
found you, I went immediately to put the rules in place that are necessary, regardless of how people feel about them.
right. Well, that's just adulting,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I mean, you know,
That's
I
what we
mean,
need.
in the end, we get teased all the time for being autistic, but I mean, you end up with the obvious conclusion: we're the only fucking adults in the room. It's okay for the politicians to play mom, which is tell you a good story so that you adhere to the rules. But somebody's got to be a parent, right? Dad, and say, these are the fucking rules, because these rules are the limits that allow us to preserve as a group. And yeah, it's fun to break the rules and lie, cheat, steal, hyper consume, practice all the 7 deadly sins. But in the end, you know, the autists sit there and say, calculate, no, you know, that doesn't work out. So I think it's funny, you know, I'm listening to you, Bart. I'm like, I don't know. I mean, yeah, you're right, but that doesn't mean it's not wrong, right? I mean, it's like autism with cultural coloring is just science. So anyway, so I got to this point. I was started out into this thing, but you know what the thing that I didn't want to have happen is have this universal science positioned as an ethnocentric ideology instead of a universal science, that our ethnicity happened by accident of history to develop. I mean, it's like saying, well, we developed biology and physics and genetics and technologies and medicine. We developed all these other things, including empiricism and empirical government. Well, I mean, those are going to be our group's biases, right? I mean, that's our group's biases, but it doesn't. The group's bias is just toward evolutionary velocity. In other words, happens to be towards truth. So, I mean, just like you can adapt, you can take on every other one of the sciences. Why can't you take on our political science, our cooperative science, right? Our behavioral science? And so I was just operating under this happy, nice Christian universalist stupid shit that I have in my head from childhood, right? I mean, but A, do other people want it? B, is it possible? And three, is selling it to the world versus your own make any sense? In other words, are we entering a phase where we might as well just say only white folk can do this? That's
Like
actually a serious question.
Yeah, issue a challenge to everyone else. Is that the frame?
Well, that's what I've said before, is I've said, you're just saying you can't or won't do it.
I think under the rules that that different types of institutions would emerge because they value different things. But as long as they were reciprocal in their emergence, they wouldn't have a problem.
Well, that's my argument, is that we don't differ in the need for trade. we differ in the need for commons,
Yes.
right?
Mhm.
And the reason we differ in the need for commons is because, frankly, we mature at different rates to different depths at different velocities. So I don't. It's pretty easy to have a lot in common with a 60-year-old black guy who's had 6 kids. I mean, we just don't. I mean, you talk to them and right, but when we're both 17, there's a big fucking difference. When we're both 12, there's a big fucking difference.
Sure.
And it's the same thing for every group. It's, my kid is in Redmond, right? So Redmond, Washington is where Microsoft is based. I shouldn't have, can I say? Yeah, I can say that. So he goes to school in Redmond. Well, I mean, you got Indian kids, Asian kids, white kids, mostly, right? Right. Well, what's the neotonic rate of development of those kids? It's East Asian, South Asian, and European, right? We're the slowest, we're the slow kids,
Mhm.
right?
Slowest to mature.
To mature. And so because they have, this is important, they have greater neoteny, so they're going to mature less, right? So we're going to mature more. Well, it's the same thing for the rest of the South Eurasians, like the Arabs and whatever. In other words, there's technically you have South Eurasians, and then you have the Semites, which are mixed Afro-Asiatics, right? And so they're slower, and the Africans are slowest, and then there's the old Africans that are spread out the rest of the world that are even slower, like Austronesia, right? So you have this thing, it's just like, well, we need different commons for 2 reasons. We mature at different rates, and the sizes of our classes are different, right? And so we do, well,
So there's 2 questions in there, right? We need to find what separates the limit of adaptation from a rate of adaptation.
correct.
Because one group may be limited in their ability to adapt and they can never get there. But
Correct.
the rest of the people, as long as they don't have that limit, then it's just how long does it take them to get there?
Correct. And so the problem is really that a society isn't individual so much as I'm not the, I mean, this has been said by 1,000 people in history. A society is children, right? A polity and an economy may be adults, but a society is the purpose of raising children. And once you think about it that way, it's the society that raises children, the economy that makes it possible, and the government that makes the economy possible, or the polity that makes the government. It's the society that makes children, the economy that makes them possible, and the polity that makes the economy possible, right? But that's you have those different needs, right? We have to satisfy those, but our populations differ. If you are like from Africa, I mean, like I say this all the time, I mean, there's not a lot of there's no difference in 140 IQ Nigerian and 140 IQ North European, except a very slight difference in verbal acuity, right? It's like what's the difference between a 140 European and 130 Ashkenazi? It's a slight difference in verbal versus systematizing acuity, right? What's the difference between an East Asian? And it's a large difference in verbal acuity and memory, right? I mean, it's a huge difference. So you look at these differences, they're real. Well, that means that every demographic needs its own commons, because the purpose of a commons is to produce the society that produces the economy that makes the society possible. Produce the economy that makes the society possible, but the society is just fucking children, and children are going to be grown like every other weed and plant and animal in the world, and they grow at different rates at different rates. So I saw my kid, and he's Northern European, right? I mean, he looks Scandinavian, right? I mean, you talk to my kid, and he's like the 99th percentile in size. He has my same sense of right, severe clarity of right and wrong. And if you start shit with him, he's going to smack you in the head. He won't start shit ever, right? But I mean, we were worried he's going to get thrown out of school. Well, if you put him in a school with South Eurasians, Afro-Asiatics, and Africans, he's going to be the calm one. But if you put him in a group where he's actually the white people versus the Indians versus the East Asians, now he's the bottom end, right? And so I'm just trying to create this spectrum of, my kid, won't tolerate disorder, right, or disrespect, right?
I tie a couple of things together.
Yeah.
A big part of that solution set is the proper placement of aggression. And you were describing like how aggressive peoples are at earlier age. Blacks are aggressive earlier.
Correct, because they're going to mature more deeply.
Correct. So that and Luke's insight in the chat the other day about the influencers being gay.
Yes.
The conservative side, we have a commons that favors feminine conflict because we don't have an outlet for the aggression that exists.
Or what's happened is we've made it extremely cheap in this forum, right? The hyper communication forum has allowed the feminine to get out of hand without getting punched in the face.
Yeah.
Whereas when I grew up, we were punching each other in the face all the time. Look at my teeth. I got this teeth. There's no back on this tooth and that one over there because punches in the face happened. It makes you good manners. It's like an armed society is a polite society. An unarmed society without a punch in the face is an impolite society. So we've built an impolite society which favors the female method of warfare. So I cut you off.
No, it's okay. The point in there is that we feminized people and they're now conflict avoidant, and we need to have conflicts more than ever to come to resolutions because now we have the science to decide those conflicts.
Right, and so we need to restore adversarialism. In other words, the ability to produce.
The left pushes for what they call anti-rivalry. You can be adversarial without being a rival. So we put in the necessary conflict resolution where they don't solve anything. So we can be anti-rivalrous, but we have to be antagonistically adversarial with one another in order to produce competition that produces excellences.
Right. So, let's go carry with it then, right? Because this ties back into the big question I'm asking. Mm-hmm. Then that's basically saying the female mind, there's a couple of solutions. We can continue to be destroyed by the female mind, like Islam destroyed every civilization, like Christianity damn near destroyed ours. Because really Christianity got captured by the state, right? It got captured by the aristocracy. So it was the same people in the church. They just handle it by force and care, right? Mom and daddy, right? So the problem here is that we're entering a phase where we no longer see the need to compromise. So even if in other words, the female mind wants to have its way, the male mind wants to have its way. And, fuck, I hate this thing. 1 second. It's probably a spam call. So the female mind wants to have its way. The male mind wants to have its way because we're both happiest. We're happiest with reciprocity, and they're happiest with the continuous verbal posturing for an attempt to achieve an equality that's impossible. Right? Reciprocity is largely possible, but equality isn't, unless you race to the bottom. The difference with reciprocity, it produces a race to the top. So the feminine produces a race to the bottom, which is what we've seen everywhere. And the masculine, which is why there's no feminine civilizations that have survived into modernity. They're going to bring up like that one group in China. And I'm like, well, that's because the peasantry was so poor it developed matrilinealism, and the aristocracy is all male, and their aristocracy has been wiped out, and they're in a part of the world where nobody wants to go because there's nothing worth shit there, right? And so the tradition hasn't changed until the cities came along and drew off their children, and now they're gone. And because the cities are back to, they've got to have property, so they go patrilineal. right? So I mean, it's like, don't make this excuse to me that there's somebody existing. They only exist. They exist like hunter-gatherer modern tribes exist. They all exist because they're outcasts from more civilized groups. I mean, they're surviving outcasts from superior groups. So, fuck, where was I going?
Males and females want to go their own ways.
Right, males and females want to go their own ways. So this is just another way of saying that the classes, which basically means the races, because the races basically differ in class size, they want to go their own ways, and so does the sex difference want to go in different ways. So we have three choices. We can like let them continue to destroy our civilization, create a race to the bottom, instead of perpetuating our race to the top. We can conquer them and create a race to the top. And despite the dead weight of carrying them, or we can separate, create a race, restore our race to the top, leaving them behind while they turn into favelas. I mean, there's three choices there. But do we want to? And the question is, which one do we want to pay for? Of course, I'm going to take the libertarian route and say, separate, leave them behind, and they'll become favelas. And in a century, you just rule them anyway, because that's all that'll happen to them. Because that's what happens to every feminine, cognitively feminine, equalitarian society. Or do we, so we have those three choices. The thing is, how do you sell that? Can you sell that? In other words, if we can't sell it, well, our solution is a relative universal, right? You can't do it. Then the only people you can sell are the people who agree with it already.
Our solutions would remove the technologies that disafford for the compatibility between men and women. We have technologies accelerating we can get from technology what we used to get from one another.
In other words, when you say technology, explain that for the audience.
I'm like, porno and OnlyFans come to mind. Like these are replacements, super stimulus for things that you used to have to go out into the world and work for. Mm-hmm. So we don't adapt to the other anymore, and we've extended the time in which it takes us to educate people, and we keep them immature through college.
So we exhaust their period of compromise or intersexual adaptation. We exhaust their period of intersexual adaptation, right? Which is what you're saying. Yes. And to the point where they have become self-interested enough and lost their ability for intersexual adaptation. So we've done this through infantilization.
That can go away under like restoring the social and intellectual commons the way they need to be restored, by removing the incentives that drive people away from one another, replacing one another, and back into compatible types of relations.
Yeah, but who gives up? Drug addicts don't give up drugs easily, unless they're right. Hyperconsumption addicts, the average woman, doesn't give it up with that. Women never give up hypergamy willfully. Men will give up under extraordinary pressure. We call it, men are loyal, women are devoted. So it's a different thing. Men will cheat, but they'll stay, right? Men will get sex, but they will stay attracted to the relationship no matter what. Whereas women will leave the relationship in order to change the relationship. Does that make sense? These are, again, intersecting curves that the number of women that will make a stupid fucking Naxalt or rejection statement against that, only proving my fucking point, will just drive me crazy. So keep going with that thing. So you're saying yeah, great. It's true. We can fix the problem, but we can fix the problem for the people who want the problem fixed.
And those are the only people who should have a say.
Well, that's what right. But what do we do with everybody else?
tell them that they are immature children that don't get a say.
Well, okay, that's a force problem.
Yeah.
That's not a selection problem.
My instinct is to always solve it from everywhere. So I say put the force on them as well as persuasion.
Okay, so you're more right than I am.
Really, the question is if their popular support is going to be helpful for us in any way.
Say that again?
The question is if their popular support is going to help us in any way.
I'm under the
If not, we can
impression.
ignore it.
I think the center left will go.
I'm under the impression that the populist position is to try the criminals we've got at the heads of our government currently.
Yeah, but does that include trying the woke people? Because we need a purge, you know, like we need a. I mean, when I wasn't joking when I originally started this movement that the problem was producing judges to produce the new version of the Spanish Inquisition in order to prosecute so many of the Marxist pomo woke, right, warfare against the civilization from within, that it was like getting the Muslims out of Spain. I mean, I originally thought that would be what was necessary. You know, what's happened though is that this problem is just spiraled to the point where it's very hard to see if that can happen.
If we go ahead, finish.
Well, I mean, so your argument is, my argument is we should try to get the force necessary to get a compromise. In other words, to separate. If we can't get that, then we're justified in applying force to dominate, right? And you're saying, well, you know, the moral answer is to get the force necessary to dominate.
Saves the most people, so you can have the violence distributed properly in a re-equilibrative manner, or you can have the chaos that you currently have that takes people at random.
Why don't we just separate and let the idiots die?
Well, I'm under the impression that it's easier to convince them otherwise.
Okay, so this is because you understand the center and center left better than I do.
I see them as females, half of whom need to be compatible but don't realize it, and they're incentivized away from cooperation.
Oh, I see.
So there's enough of them that will come over, that'll move the herd enough where we can isolate the woke, because that's the problem. The problem is those who wield the violence, the feminine violence to rally and grow, you know, that entropic force against us. But the cooperative center will go and it'll pull enough of the fringes away.
So the science that is that the feminine mind signals virtue when it's actually signaling evasion of responsibility for paying a cost of social friction. And so what you're saying is if we create a means by which they are no longer paying the cost of social friction, right, they'll go the other direction. Right? Okay, well, that goes to the populist question, right? Now, Martin says the opposite, is that, right? Martin, is your argument that we can't convince enough people that the woke are evil?
Can I add a little bit of nuance?
I know, I'm just trying to, to see if I can illustrate for the audience because we each, the three, I don't know about Luke's position, but the three of us have slightly different positions.
Mm-hmm.
And that's actually the issue, which is one of probability, right? And the probability is determined by our understanding. Now, I admit I have a lack of understanding, right? Because it's just, I'm a fucking idiot when it comes to this stuff. So you go ahead and qualify it, and then I want to sort of hear Martin's view.
We shouldn't be doing the convincing. It's the leaders on the other side that will convince everyone. You know, we only have to convince those who already have the audiences. they will be pushed into a corner where they have to act rationally, and that'll be swaying the herd towards doing the thing that's cooperative.
This goes back to they're the priests and we're the judges.
Correct.
And that's how we ought to structure it. And it's like,
it's Luke's position.
what?
I believe that is Luke's position.
Is that Luke's position?
Yes.
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 The verbalization part of agreement does help once in a while.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's called consent. It's like when, of course, you've been out of the sexual market for so long, you forgot that thing, right?
I am the sexual market.
Martin, can you try to elucidate why you're pessimistic about convincing anyone?
So women and feminine in general adapt to socially dominant narrative. The regime has spent years working on seeing our narrative as evil. Anything that even comes close, anything that even slightly, it reminds them of Trump, it's automatically Nazism.
Yeah.
Their fictional version of Nazism. So
this
maybe
is like,
that's crossable, but it's that much harder.
okay, so I tend to go, I don't have confidence in my position. So that's why I just take the science, right? I don't know if I could convince anybody. I just know it's true. Right? I can produce a bunch of judges who also know it's true. That's now, so the question becomes, who do you work with? Now,
Anyone who will work with us.
oh, well, that's interesting. Because the people most likely to work with us may be the people that's least valuable to work with.
Maybe. But if it brings about the changes we want, then
Well, no, I mean, the people who agree with us may be the worst people to work with. In other words, they're not the focus of discourse, because they only increase the alienation of the people who matter, which is the priests.
I don't think I understand your categories.
Well, to me, I'd rather talk to the Jewish, gay, feminine axis that's largely dominant in the center and center left.
They are the talkers. They're
the priesthood.
yes.
Right?
Yep.
And we're the judiciary and the military,
Mhm.
right? Actually, we're the judiciary, and the people who agree with us are the military,
Correct.
right? I mean, that's how that's the trifunctional analysis of it.
I see it as interfacing for the bad people. Bad in that they are those who would be violent on anyone's behalf if they must.
Yes.
All right, well, you have people who give those people the go ahead. Well, those are the people who can decide when it's okay to go ahead.
Right.
That's the threat. Because our position is rational and coherent, and we can wield it from any in-group.
Yeah, the thing is, I think your strategy is right, which is what I always say. I think your strategy is always better than mine. I think all of us are right in our understanding of the problem. It's just, how do we go to market? In other words,
See, and I'm approaching it from a slightly different angle. I'm trying to, I bring up the top line of baselines often. So what I am trying to do, or what I'm working towards, is restoring people's access to accurate baselines. Because right now, everybody's the incentives that people are acting on are dysfunctional incentives. So we don't even know how people are really going to react.
well, the whole purpose of the Jewish feminine, maternal authoritarian trend, right? The priesthood trend is to use the new technology of mass media, right? The availability of increasing mass media from the Marxist period forward and especially the education system and the media and the entertainment system now. And they've used this to basically say what matters is power, not truth.
Right.
Right, because they want the power to overcome truth, because truth is unpleasant to them. Right, because that means they can't have power.
Right.
Right, because the truth leads you to benevolent paternalism,
right,
which constrains hyperconsumption and mandates paying the cost of responsibility. So essentially, we're always saying, conservatives, we don't want to pay taxes. What we mean is we don't want to pay monetary taxes. We're happy to pay behavioral taxes all fucking day long.
Right.
They're the opposite. They want to pay taxes so that they don't, monetary taxes, so they don't have to pay behavioral taxes.
Dependents will never take responsibility.
Correct.
You have to transition away from dependence in order to access responsibility.
Correct.
And so my whole shtick is we have to figure out how to move people out of dependence.
Well, I mean, again, there's, I always say this, is that, I'm a CEO and
Right.
I'm an operational CEO, in other words, right? I focus on what's the procedures, processes, and incentives necessary to bring about change. And so knowing what has to happen is different from how to make it happen, and whether how to make it can happen.
Right.
And so I'm just trying to figure out, can this fucking happen?
Right.
And my problem is that I'm like, you have to have a condition under which people are looking for an answer that is that overcomes the present costs. Now, I said that in the past that the convergence that would happen, which is happening now, would create us in an environmental circumstance where the pretense of with globalism, of the victory of liberalism over everything else, over the end of history, over the female method of winning the war against tradition. I've said that that's going to break with the equalization of military, industrial, and political power between the civilizations, which has happened, and it was going to happen with the economic collapse that happened as a result. What I understood that there would be a demographic change, but I didn't think it would be it's worse than I expected. Right. And the thing that the left succeeded at, and the only reason they succeeded, is through Hispanic immigration. So this is the only reason they've succeeded, because otherwise we have the numbers to win. And even then, the Hispanics are starting to break our direction, because they're, again, Christian and familial oriented.
Right.
And
I would say it's lower class immigration, because they started with the Irish even. I mean, so
right.
It's not just Hispanic. It's always been lower class immigration that they advocate for and thrive on. So
yeah, the thing is, you can domesticate largely. I mean, look at you fucking Irish people. I mean, I'm trying to get a smile out of Brand.
I'm Irish.
I know, that's what I'm saying. Look at you fucking Irish people. You
Um,
can't, if you can domesticate you guys, we can domesticate anybody. Right? No, I'm just teasing. But the Irish were a problem. The Italians were worse. Right? And the Jews were worse.
We're the black people of white people.
What?
The Italians and the Irish. That's my heritage. We're the black people of white people.
Well, it's not even Italians, it's just the Southern Italians. They're Greek, right? Right?
Yes.
Right. And I don't have that opinion of the Irish. It was originally thought that way, right?
Yes, it was.
Right. But that's not true anymore. Because, if you're basically, the whole thing is, are you Christian and will you integrate? Right. I mean, it doesn't take any more than that. It's like when I go to the South and I meet these evangelical black folk, they're fine. Right. It's the urban.
Well, this project is setting a new standard for integration, right?
Well, yes, because we don't fucking care. Because it doesn't. science is science. It doesn't give a shit. Either you're going to pay the cost of living by the scientific method or not. Now, the question is just whether it's in your group's interest to do that heterogeneously in an empire or homogeneously in nation states. Well, the evidence is that if you do it in nation states, then you can produce the commons that are necessary for your people because of their rate and depth of maturity. In other words, what they need. In other words, it's easier to, you need different rules for impulsive people than you do for less impulsive and aggressive. Impulsive and aggressive versus less impulsive and aggressive. Yet, even among blacks, you see the thing that's obvious is they're actually slightly more pro-social, right? And so they need the external stimulation to feel comfortable, right? And they need the auto association. So you see this. So these minor differences where we're fucking Northern Europeans. I mean, you stick 5 of us in a hut for 9 months of the year in the dark. As long as there's some cows around to milk, we'll find something useful to do and get along fine, right? I mean, but that's not for that. They're not like that. They need the group to feel good. And so, and I'm just using us as ends of the spectrum. Then you go all the way to the freaking East Asian people and they're freaking like ants, right? It doesn't really matter. They just keep going. So, I mean, groups need different norms, traditions, values, and institutions because of their behavioral traits. Male and females, we currently are diverging because of this. Now, the question is, do we let the female minds go separate and crash, or do we actually try to bear the cost of domesticating them? And of course, my view is if we can domesticate them, fine. We can't let them destroy us because it's the end of the European axis. In other words, evolutionary velocity. And then, or we can, so we can't let them crash us. We can crash them, or we can separate, and then they'll crash. So I mean, it's just, which one do we do? And you're saying that, Brandon, that if we work with the priest, their side, the center left, and we maintain the judges and we work through the leadership, that it might be possible. Martin is saying, I just want to see if I can summarize so the audience will follow. Martin is saying, well, we'll never convince these fucking people, right? Because it's absolutely fucking impossible. And the momentum they have is so high that we'll never overcome it. And I can't tell what Luke is trying to say.
The methodology affords for a redistribution. So what are we offering? Here, the priests get the capital of the academy, the media, and so on, and they can wield that capital to domesticate the people that they claim are worthy of people, right? And we can adjudicate if there's problems.
We have the military and the.
And all I'm saying is that if we fix the undermining, if we fix for the vulnerability, and people are operating from an accurate baseline, they'll want domestication as much as we do. They will see the value in it. They're not going to see it under these artificial conditions.
Well, so, okay, let's switch the tactic then. Do we talk in that case, if you look at our policies, they're pretty center, right? Right. The thing that they don't like is the hard left is going to hate that they can't lie anymore. The woke are going to hate that they can't lie anymore. The politicians are going to hate that they can't lie anymore and manipulate. The left academy is going to hate that they're out of a fucking job. And the financial sector is going to go into a dead fucking kill us all panic because we're going to gut their ability to rent seek on the population. In exchange, the population gets almost everything it wants. Whether you're the left and you think the corporations are corrupt, they are. You're on the right, you think the government and the corporations are corrupt, they are, right? The government, the corporations, the academy, the media are all corrupt on the right, right? And so, and then the issue only becomes matters of family.
I want to coerce everybody into the proper adaptive valley.
Well, I mean,
change.
Well, I mean, that's great, except what does proper mean? No, they don't see proper the way we do. They see proper as having the least conflict and the most opportunity for intersocial communication because they're more dependent on each other. They're female. They need to get information from each other. They can't process information themselves. Excuse me. That's why they need priests, and we only need rules. We only need loyalty and hierarchy and law, and we're fine because there's rules. Okay, I can follow the rules. I get my status from doing my duty, right? I don't need your fucking affirmation. But they don't work by that rule. They need continuous affirmation, and they need their information processed. In other words, they need to find out together how to maximize their consumption with the least amount of intersocial friction. I mean, that's what they're solving for. Hyperconsumption at the least intersocial friction, right? Well, we're solving for capitalization at the least intersocial friction. Well, those are two things, are fucking opposites.
The hyper consumption has to be, just as aggression has to be directed towards the commons, the hyper consumption has to be directed towards the children, the immature. So where the feminine is stealing, right, is where they're hyper consuming and virtue signaling with that consumption, as opposed to redistributing it to.
In other words, we've produced a social, political, and economic system that favors the investment in children, and women are consuming all that surplus instead of producing children.
Right.
Okay. Well, shit, that's the economics of it, right? That's the physics of it, right? I mean, that's what's happening. And so the answer is, well, if that's the case, then you're not going to produce children, then we're not going to contribute to the commons, which you consume. Because you're not, there's no, right?
Off the cash valve.
You turn off the cash valve. Well, I mean, the way you do that, of course, is that you say, if, you know, is that men pay men's taxes and women pay women's taxes. And that'll handle it right there, because women don't actually pay any taxes. God, they probably can't stand that. That in the aggregate, they're all parasites on white men over 35. We're strong, empowered women. Actually not. The only thing that's happened today is we outsourced all the good jobs, leaving debt expansionary jobs available for women. And they just don't know that. You ever met an HR department that was worth having?
The feminism wing of a corporation.
Yeah. It's basically the what's the political wing of the Soviets? The political officers.
Politburo.
Huh?
Politburo.
Yes. So if you're in a Russian something, you have a political officer. Well, we don't think of it that way, but the Chinese have that too. If you have a company, you have a political officer or more of them in your company managing it on behalf of the state. So I say fascism won. And the thing is, I don't want it to win here. I mean, I keep telling the fascist guys, you don't actually want fascism. You want rule of law. It's just you don't know how to get there. And they've destroyed your concept of law and your understanding of how it can work. Right? You'd happily defend the law if it was written down somewhere, just like you defend the science if it's written down somewhere, because the law wouldn't disagree with anything you believe in. The problem is you think that some fucking dictator is going to solve the problem when it's only going to make it worse. All right. Do we kill that question? Not really. We still haven't. I feel like I understand the problem we face. I still understand that Brandon's right in the sense of what's the optimum strategy.
Win everywhere at the same time.
Yeah, I know I understand. Yeah, and I know it's right. What I'm looking for is, can we concentrate efforts anywhere in order to increase the rate? But that's just populism. I'm falling victim to my own bias.
Well, we all do that.
Well, I mean, that's why I love this group. Everybody says, why do you, I said, no, when I run a company, I actually use my board. Right? This is why you have a board. It's not so that the board can tell you what to do. It's not so you can tell the board what to do. It's because you want other smart fucking guys.
Either way.
Yeah. You want other smart fucking guys to say, that's a stupid idea, or this is a better idea.
Yes.
But the problem is you need smart fucking guys. So what you want on the board isn't investors. They're usually stupid fucking guys. You want investors to be on your board in order to get you access to more capital. What you really want is other entrepreneurs on your board. Right? You want other guys who understand the market and the whole thing. Now, my view is a board should, if your board doesn't consist of your top management of your company and people who have been from other related industries, that it's just a political system. But we're functioning as a board, and I just want to, and I'm just using that as an example of this is how you use a board, is you never think you're fucking right. Right? You can't believe you're right. You can only be in a position of saying, this is the best I can do, help me do better. Right? And then in the end,
the best we can do. Natural law is the best we can do. I'm asking you to do better. That's
Brandon, I'm Brandon, fuck, I keep doing this today. I've called you Brandon. Martin, how do you answer, how many questions a day do you answer for people?
It varies a lot. Sometimes 10, sometimes none.
Because I read what you say in the Telegram, and you're fucking godlike. It's amazing. I want to go, I'm sitting there, I want to have that. I used to have a soundboard on my computer when I worked with the guys in the dev room, and I had all those Quake sounds as quick hotkeys. It was like godlike or triple kill. And sometimes Martin answers a question, and I want to go triple kill, hit the button because I think it's so good. But you seem to be bringing these guys along pretty well.
Well, a lot of new ones have appeared out of nowhere who seem to basically get it.
I wonder why that is.
they've been watching.
Right.
That's why they've been watching. Whether they've been watching the catastrophe.
A lot of, I mean, relative to the size of the chat, so it's still like less than 10 people.
That are new, you mean?
Yeah.
Well, but what's all we can't. It's pretty, it's like, what's the maximum size of a class you can teach? If you want to add a grad class, it's 10 or 12, right? If you ask a teacher, a grade school teacher, to say it's 15, 18, right? If you ask the government, it's 25 or 30, right? And then which is fucking bullshit. You only teach about as many kids as you can have, right? That's how we're sort of wired. And so we can't really until we have the courseware done, which we'll get to, because we're certainly getting there. You can only onboard so many people at a time because you can only keep them in your head. Now, in a Facebook, it got to the point where we had we had 20,000 people involved, and I'm like, I can only keep track of maybe the top 100. And even then, I start confusing them, right? So yeah, that's probably true. But we don't need, we only need that many. We got a couple. It's risky to ask this on a recording, but we've got a couple of new guys we've added to the insiders group, right? They seem to be quite good. Are they doing okay?
Yeah. But they've been around for a while too.
Yeah. They what?
They have been around for a while too.
Right. Well, it takes a while. We're not going to bring somebody into basically the management team if they can't do the work. They're supposed to share the work, not give us more.
Right. Yeah. There's lots of people right now that are quality candidates to be teaching the material.
There's what?
There's a lot of people right now that are quality candidates to be teaching the material.
Right.
We just gotta package it for them.
We're just about there.
They're off to the races.
So. I realize if I was going to toggle over to my screenshot, number one is education this year.
What I really wish we could find is a couple of these priest guys willing to take on the role of teaching this stuff, even if it was just because they wanted to disprove it. I wish they would take on the role of learning it enough to teach it, because then we'd have some outreach to these other groups, and we could test how well it runs.
Okay, so let me switch back then. So I made this quick video, right? This video the other day with, it's an excerpt I pulled out of a conversation with Dr. Brad. And I did it as saying that's the, I did the one optimum solution of the Rustin question, right? Which I thought was, and I did the complete answer, which is, this is actually just a normal process of the end of the agrarian period, the industrial period, and the enablement of the bifurcation of the sexes. And then that means in other words, the specialization in our natural interests and the letting loose of the female method of social construction, antisocial behavior, anti-political, anti-civilizational warfare, and that that the Jews came in and they're the world practitioners of female female method of warfare, and that the two together have used media to basically create the PC woke crisis, right? This is a natural thing, right? There's nothing special about this. This is a predictable phenomenon, but we didn't suppress the female means of antisocial, anti-political, anti-civilizational crime. The problem, so to do that just means restoring us to adult conversation, which means truthful, reciprocal conversation, which just means prohibiting the female method of antisocial behavior in public just as much as we've prohibited the male method of antisocial behavior in public. The problem is that the feminist community has tried to legitimize the female method of warfare as and so the postmodernist has tried, in other words, they've tried to say that the feminine is equal to the masculine, instead of the female method of warfare is equal to the masculine method of warfare by other means. They have produced postmodernism, which is just that truth doesn't matter, only power does, which is again the female method of warfare. They've said that truth doesn't exist, which is again the female method of social construction. The Marxists and the neo-Marxists have made a false promise of freedom from the laws of nature, scarcity behavior, and evolution, right? So they've again used the female false promise of freedom from the laws of the universe. So I mean, the PC woke is just the female attempt to undermine the patriarchy, which is the male limit on hyperconsumption and the male limit on the female use of anti-social, anti-political, anti-civilizational warfare. Now, how do I deliver that message? How do we deliver that message? We can deliver that message. Let me finish. Then we take it to say, okay, well, this is what our law does. It equalizes the suppression of the female antisocial behavior as it does the male, and it fixed these holes in our constitution so that's enabled this. And so we've equally suppressed the male and female methods of antisocial behavior, limiting us to equal responsibility for the commons. So we restored that ability to conduct transactions and force us into trades. The problem is the female doesn't want a trade. It wants a discount. It wants a taking. It wants to assume a natural, in other words, when they say society, they mean equality us. We say society, we mean alliance of men who have families, an alliance of tribes. There is no us unless it's voluntary. They say there's an intrinsic us, which is that we own you men, right? That's what they're saying. We own you and your proceeds, rather than, actually, no, we own our own proceeds and we pool them together if it's for mutual benefit, and we don't pool them together if it's not for mutual benefit. In other words, reciprocity. So, then we show how the the policies actually restore our economy, so the left isn't being screwed, the right isn't being screwed, women aren't being screwed, and men aren't being screwed. And we do that. And the problem is they'll say, well, that's just whiteness. You mean that's just truth and reciprocity? Truth, reciprocity, because meritocracy is going to be the result of truth and reciprocity. Trade is going to be the result, because is only possible under reciprocity. So, you know, we can say all that stuff, and that's what the actual problem is. That's how to actually fix it. But is that a sellable message? In other words, they're going to hate the truth. It's like Darwin came out and said, okay, yeah, but the church was the only people getting fucked, and the people were pretty sick of the church fucking them. Right, and then, you know, right, the French brought about the anti-enlightenment, right, the counter-enlightenment and then the Germans brought it, and what were they saying is that it's fucks the state, but we want to fuck the state. The problem is, Galileo came out and said, sorry, this is gonna fuck your superstition. Right, but the people say, good, we don't want like our superstition. Well, you know, that's good. There's always somebody that's empowered. In other words, the bottom of the pyramid has always been empowered in the past. What happens when we say we destroy all that and say, actually, only the middle is going to be empowered? The family. Because that's what we're saying.
We're also simultaneously extending the pathway to the middle to everybody.
Correct. We're increasing the middle, right? But if you don't want to play the game because you're always going to be left behind on one end, or you're prohibited from getting ahead on the other, that's the left, right?
Their retaliation is license. If they're to retaliate against the solution that we propose, they are the aggressors. You have the right to react to the aggression. Right now, the aggression is hidden. I mean, it's in the social construction and so on. We see it as violence. We categorize it as feminine violence, but you want to push them into a corner where they actually aggress, right?
Yeah, I know that, but how do you get on stage or on video or whatever and say, this is the truth of what happened? This is how we correct it. Well, you know, you're going to have the people who say, well, I just want to live a peaceful life where we're not hating each other. They're going to go for it. Right. But I mean, if you're a feminist, you're not going to want that truth any more than the church wanted Darwin. Right. If you're a postmodernist, you're going to say, this is a threat to my livelihood. Just like the deep state is going to defend itself. All this academy, media, et cetera, is going to defend itself. So you need to have a way to get a body of people large enough to conduct warfare against these entrenched things, right? Verbal warfare against these, if you're going to resort to verbal warfare. I mean, my solution was probably wrong, because I didn't understand this. It was that I didn't think you could ever do that. The only way to do it is to hold a gun to their head, right? Which is, I don't mean that, I mean that figuratively. You show up with a lot of people, make a set of demands, and then you force the conversation. I believe you could only force the conversation. So I'm still asking the underlying question. Is it possible to have the conversation and actually win, versus is it necessary to force the conversation in order to have the conversation and potentially win? You see what I'm asking?
I've never stopped pursuing forcing the conversation. So
your attitude is we just continue to do both.
I would ask, are they even capable of conversing?
Well, I mean, they're not. The question is, it's a third, and a third. So the question is the middle third, right? This is like this case in any election. We have the right and the left in some sort of spectrum in every country. But who really decides the election is the I don't give a fuck middle. Right? They're just making a pragmatic decision. So everybody creates a lot of noise. So the person who's least informed and least cares makes an emotional decision.
We give them.
That's what happens in a democracy.
We give them the ability to make the decidable decision.
Well, that's the thing is, this is where the problem Martin and I are, at least Martin and I are having. I'm not sure about Luke because he's not interjecting enough here, but the problem Martin and I are having is that it's hard to believe that we can get that middle amidst the noise. And so what you're saying is,
how would I delineate those groups? Like, well, Trump supporters are the middle, and he has most people.
I was talking about the left, not the middle.
Well, we can't. I mean, but there's the center left, right? I mean, center left is still. I'm positioning it as the dedicated right, the dedicated left, and the center right and center left, right? So I view the center right and center left as fungible. That's what the data says, right? And the center left is bigger than the center right, right? It's so there's a sort of left shift in the demographic distribution. It's only a few percent. But these people in the middle who are actually unaffiliated, they're just pragmatic, are the one who makes the decision about who gets elected. And so it's actually, the big problem is, can you get people who don't give a shit to show up to vote? Because the people who don't give a shit to show up to vote are the ones who determine elections. So your least informed voter makes it. So the question is, can we win those people? Because like Martin's saying, we can't win the left. They're going to fight us tooth and nail. Not all of them, but certainly anybody who's invested in it, because they're actually mentally ill.
Yes. Yes.
I mean, we know that now. I always think it's funny. I remember back in the 90s, they're trying to make the case that conservatives were, maybe even the early 2000s, mentally ill. And of course, we do the science, and it turns out it's drastically more that liberals are mentally ill. And matter of fact, a white liberal woman is almost guaranteed to be mentally ill.
Yes, the rates are astounding.
Right?
Well, we did do away with asylums.
The problem is this is the problem with crazy chicks, is they create a lot of noise.
Well, the woke is the crazy chicks of politics.
Correct.
Oh, well, the idea is just isolate them and their craziness, right?
Yeah,
Everyone else is the middle.
How
Well,
can we
that's what I'm actually working at. That's why I made the shift that I made into what I'm doing now. It's women are equal to men when men forfeit, right? And so we've suppressed and we repress men's aggression, and that lets women's aggression run wild, right?
We stop policing the commons.
Well, there's this perception of safety that's not real. The safety is only there because of the restraint of men, right? So it's not real safety, but they believe it's real safety, and it's driving this huge dysfunction about what they're responding to in the environment. They believe that cooperation is the only thing on the table, that avoidance and violence aren't even options anymore, and that they live in a safe environment. But that safe environment only exists because men forfeit disruption of that safe environment.
We're only ahead of the natural pinch that's coming, because our solutions become more and more viable as the chaos increases. Again, because we offered decidability.
The reason
we're not offering an opinion or an ideology philosophy.
Right.
We're offering scientific decidability, period, end of story. There's no question.
Optimal decidability for the variables at hand. It's like, you want to be we'd go back to one breadwinner that can support a family, one conscientious worker, because we got all the people who are stealing.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. That, again, you go back to it. My view is cut the fuckers off.
Yeah.
That's why I want to separate.
But the reason I got into training people in situational awareness is because it puts their focus back on the existence of danger in their environment. It gets them closer to that real baseline. And so they stop taking for granted the dynamic between men and women. They stop taking for granted that cooperation is the only thing on the table, because I'm teaching them how to watch their environment all the time for the fact that threats exist and you need to be aware of them. I'm retraining.
So
that
in
skill
a
set.
clockwise fashion, we have declining precision,
Right.
inclining numbers, declining. Okay, now that's a great frame for me. Now I understand. All right, so I understand. The problem is, like, they've intentionally removed men from policing the commons, and they used it by using Black people. Right? They said you can't, right? And the reason they use Black people is to allow Jewish people. Right? That's what they did, right? And they said, it's not like I'm fucking insightful. They wrote it down and they said that's what they're going to do, right? I mean, but so they tried to bring the Jewish female method into majority, which is of course the case, right? Because if you look at all the conservative side, the popular conservative side, they're all gay or Jewish. I can't tell what Peterson is, but he's weird.
He's Canadian.
Canadian.
He's Canadian.
He's Canadian. It's the same as being gay. God, that's horrible. Oh.
Well, it's a verbal acuity and the ability to make an emotional case for things, right?
Yeah, I just, we can, like I said, we can analyze everything. So we can analyze Peterson as starting with stoicism, but not wanting to give up on suggestibility. In other words, because he's a therapist, and where we would use we would use truth, which causes you to be responsible for your own self-maintenance. He uses suggestion, which is to evade your own self-regulation, right? Your own self-criticism, in order to bypass your self-regulation, which would resist change. So that, he's confusing truth and therapy, right, in order to preserve therapy. So he's killing which was, I was hoping what he was doing. I was hoping he was trying to recreate stoicism in modern prose, which is cognitive behavioral therapy. If you read his 12 Rules for Life, that's what he's got. The problem is he came up through the literary side and he came up from the therapeutic side. So he doesn't understand he's using suggestion, not convincing. Right. And so we lost his ability to recreate the religion we need, which is Stoicism. Unfortunately, that's ending up for us. That's why I don't want to do it. Right. I want to finish this so I can work on that. But, that's another life project. But Stoicism comes out of our work because it has to begin with truth, and all we say religion is the use of social structures to cause adaptation to agency by self-regulation by developing agency. The thing is that you can use suggestion, which is what Peter doing, or you can use social cohesion, which is ritual. Right. Like the Asians, they do everything together in a group. It's no wonder they have these weird sex things where they can't have sex by themselves. They have to have 12 guys around to make sure they're okay. I know I got another reaction. I got like 4 reactions out of Brandon today. I must be back on the ball because like
That's how you can tell.
I can tell. So they do everything together. My sister, is flawed a person as she is quite good at saying, speak it and move it in a group, right? So basically, get kids to do things physically. My mommy says this, because that, and jumping jacks and all this other stuff in a group, because it's the easiest way to learn, because it basically uses your whole brain. In other words, your physical brain, your emotional brain, and your verbal brain, in order to train your brain into some set of ideas in the safest possible place, which is where everybody's just doing the same thing as you. So the Asian method's great. This problem with the Stoic method is that it places all the burden on you. This is why it was only available to the middle, upper middle, and upper classes. That's why the Christians rejected the attempts of the integrating Stoicism into Christianity into Stoicism instead of Platonism into Christianity. Am I going off on a tangent here? Yeah. Did I go off too far?
No, you're not off too far. So let me see if I can tie what you're saying into what I'm trying to demonstrate or articulate here. You guys are familiar, I'm sure, with Calhoun's Rat Utopia, right?
Of course.
Right. So in a lot of ways, this conversation to me seems to be how do we looking at the rats inside the Rat Utopia and going, how do we fix rats? And what I'm saying is we don't have to fix rats. The rats aren't the problem. You look anywhere outside the Rat Utopia and the rats are just fine because they're responding to their accurate baseline, right? The normal stresses of rat world, right? Now humans are capable of things that rats aren't capable of. We have cognition that they just can't have, right? So we can have the human version of the Rat Utopia without falling prey to the problems of the Rat Utopia, but only by developing mindfulness.
Correct.
Only by developing that self-determination. Can we have both of those things? And that's what the power of mindfulness gives us. It gives us the opportunity to have those interactions, to have those interdependencies without becoming the Rat Utopia. But we're losing, or we're not building that mindfulness. So now our cities and our groups and our interactions are becoming more and more Rat Utopia-like. And now we're looking at that and going, how do we fix humans? And we're not going to fix it from there. We have to fix it from the mindfulness. We have to fix it from the correct baselines, right?
But the female intuition is the opposite, right?
Right.
It's to drive toward Rat Utopia.
Right.
Interesting detail I remember about the Utopia. It was Mouse Utopia, actually. It was quickly fixed by removing a few very specific individuals from the terrarium. Those were causing all the problems, so sending out false signals in PISA and all that.
So, this goes, so that's basically, the point of tolerance is empirically determinable by removing the individuals who maximize the problem, right?
Right.
So again, we, if we get control, we have to do a purge. Now we can do the purge softly, which is just to outlaw and let nature take its course. Or we can do the purge aggressively and prosecute, which is prosecute people for their crimes, so that we create a record of those crimes, right? Or we can use it hyper aggressively, which is the French Revolution. Now, of course, my instinct is to do the first, which is just let the market solve the problem. But the problem is the enemy is so good at creating lies, right? That it's very difficult to.
They're not better at creating lies than we are at suppressing them.
Yeah, that's probably true.
We've
got their number. All right. So
their powers are restrained. That is the entirety of their power.
Right. They only have power because we'd let them.
Right.
Yes. That's actually the message. They only have power because we let them.
We're paying the entire cost of cooperation right now.
And they're just maintaining as much infantilism as possible because they don't want to pay the cost of adulting.
Right.
Okay.
Because we're letting them.
Because we're letting them. I thought I had one more thing I wanted to cover because we really did a good job on that. Okay, do we have time? Can I spend another few minutes, or are we done with our time?
Go ahead.
What?
You can go ahead.
So, okay, so world chaos. So I can tell my brain is coming back because I can run models in my head now. And I ran one last night and I'm terrified.
We've got the absolute worst people in charge to face what's coming.
Because I know what I would do if I were Putin and Xi and Iran and North Korea. Because you can't take 200,000 white people in America. And of those 200,000 people, some virtuous signaling idiots in Washington and an army that's made of Scots Irish, right? Intergenerational warrior families, of which the 2 million people supposedly in arms are only 200,000 that actually function combat roles, who work in a military that's organized for suppressing civil wars, and we have no stockpiles of arms, and our weapons are old, against people who are in the exact opposite position, only their armies aren't experienced. And so if you look at the numbers, I mean, they talk about us having the most powerful military in the world, but the minute you lose the Navy in the first missile war, and the minute you try to do anything about Russia on the Eurasian landmass, and the minute the Iranians decide that they can get away with taking the North Saudi oil fields, which of course, you got to remember, the ethnicities vary all over the place in the Middle East, but the North Saudi oil fields are ethnically Iranian, Persian, right? They're not ethnically Saudi. And so you start seeing this, and then you start saying South Korea can only survive by doing something bad. And I'm just looking at this thinking, this is a perfect storm. Now you take that in a population who would have been radically excited by that threat, and you put them through 2.5 years of artificial suppression by COVID, right? You kill the service industry and the sociability of the people. You sit them in boxes, and you desocialize them, and then you hypersensitize them through social media to intergroup frictions. You got a government that has becoming post-democratic because contrary to all the left's desires, which is female, heterogeneous. The only guarantee of a revolution is a heterogeneous society whose government has become illiberal. And that's those are two indicators of it. When, in other words, an ethnically heterogeneous society becomes liberal, you can pretend you can have an ethnically heterogeneous society if you have extraordinary wealth. But the minute you have extraordinary wealth, then people always demonstrate kin selection, because kin selection is the greatest discount in cooperation, right? Because it's the least friction of cooperation, and it's instinctual. So we know that from every fucking test there is in the world. So I'm just saying this perfect storm, and I'm like, why wouldn't you do it if you're them?
They would.
And you wipe the USA, NATO, European dominance, American dominance, and the European era off the fucking map.
You're watching
in 9 months, you wipe it off the map.
The globalists are baiting the conflict.
Well,
everywhere.
The globalists' idea was to manufacture this conflict. The natural alliance is between the US, Germany, and Russia.
Yes.
That's the natural alliance for civilizational defense. But you hear this stuff going on. You don't hear anybody going to Russia. It's like, fuck it. Take responsibility, guarantee these things, everybody's territorial integrity, right? We'll guarantee yours, right? And the USA will exit Europe, right? Because we only need to have a naval. We can't fight a war in Eurasia from distance. Nobody's going to attack us on the seas or the air. They can't. We're like a fucking enormous island, and so is Australia. It's not like anybody can do anything about it. What'll happen is the Nordic countries will join the Anglo sphere, something will happen like that. The continental countries will stay the same, and Russia won't have any threat, so they don't have any reason for territorial aggression, because they're afraid of a legitimate thing. that European sovereignty is possible because of the geographic and cultural homogeneity. But Russia is still an empire that has undomesticated regions that can't allow sovereignty to emerge. Otherwise, they'll destroy the entire Russian civilization, reduce the Russian Empire to a bunch of people who will flood east into the only three cities, like Ekaterinburg, Moscow, St. Petersburg, and whatever else is. I can't remember the rest of the cities. Now they'll lose the whole Russian expansion and only restore the terror that they have is that the East is going to come in and kick their ass again. So the solution's easy, but you never see anybody talk about it.
It's because it would solve the problem.
Because it would solve the problem. And the Russians came to us. They said, just bring us into NATO. And we said, no. It wasn't we. It was the people that are the attempting to maintain the division between the Anglosphere, the West Germanic, the Germanic, and the Russian spheres, right? And you have France over there encouraging it, the division, because they think they're going to win the game. They have no fucking chance of winning the game. I mean, they're the fucking entry into the problem in the first place, the source of all bad ideas. All right, so I'm fucking scared shitless because my brain's working again and I can play it out. I can't think of why not to do it if you're them. Especially since if Russia moves, then China can move. And once China moves, Iran can move. And once that happens, it's, fucking Turkey can try to seize Cyprus, and France will maybe handle that. But I mean, that's about, because France really owns the Mediterranean now, because they own West Africa, they own the Mediterranean. And Matt says, but fuck it. And the Russians aren't, the Russians, they're not moral in war, they're just empirical. So they're going to cut sea cables, run, they think about stuff. The same thing. We're trying to police the world and build a better place. They don't want that place because democracy doesn't work for them. China is an empire, Russia's an empire, and Europe's a federation. And they don't want any of our shit. So am I missing something here, or is
they're right not to want our shit? It doesn't work.
It doesn't fucking work. I mean, Russia would have a whole different attitude if woke wasn't here.
Yes.
So what am I missing? This is. I can run positive scenarios too, but I can't believe any of them.
Right.
And you know why? Is because we have come to believe that a government in the West can't override the people. In other words, can't impose stresses on the people, except in extraordinary circumstances. But Russia and China view imposing stresses on the people as nationalistic and heroic. And the people do too. So they view it as a means of membership, whereas we view our liberty as a means of membership. So if you look at that, then you look at the Chinese and how they run their economy and the Russian economy, and you realize they have two different ways of imposing costs on their population, both of which the population will be okay with and in the long-term benefit from. So I'm like, I don't see a way out of this. I just don't. I mean, there has to be something. In other words, the only reason they would refuse to seize the opportunity is a matter of convenience. Does that make sense? They would just say, well, as things go, I can make better use of my time over here. It's not that the opportunity is seizable.
When will the opportunity come again?
Well, I mean, that's the thing, is if you're Russia, you're running up against a demographic problem. right? And you're running up against the problem that if the Trump strategy succeeds, which is the U.S. is withdrawing and Europe has to regain its arms, and Europe is suspicious of Russia because it's already broken the post-war treaty by invading another country. Well, then, Russia's got to act. And the other part I was undervaluing was how much I wasn't thinking about Putin and Xi's age. Is they're trying to enter this and exit this cycle, their generational cycle, with restoring their empires, and they see this window of opportunity as narrow. Because in China's case, it's catastrophically narrow. They can't get around. But in Russia's case, it's catastrophically narrow. So I can't see why not to do it. And I can't, and I'm like, World War III, what are we going to do? We can't fight an end front war with 200 real men we can put in the field, and with airplanes that are on their 8th generation or whatever the hell it is, where we have to transport hardware across. And we can't do it. I mean, the only war we can have is a missile war. I mean, we can have a submarine war, but I mean, Jesus Christ, you want to talk about a rapid reallocation of world patterns of trade? I mean, that's how you kill the Chinese, right? I mean, you just starve them to death. The way you kill Russians is attrition warfare, which is what we do, because they really don't have that. They don't have a large enough population to fight Europeans in attrition warfare for a long time if Europeans don't want to be conquered. You can't do it, and they don't have the capacity to rule a more superior civilizations. So,
well, we're investing in diversity training, so never been a better time to come at us.
But again, the reason the feminine Jewish method is warfare by destruction of the institutions of cultural production. Eliminate whiteness and eliminate whites. They've done it. Done a good job. So the problem is, like you said, we put up with it. The problem is, how do you say, okay, I've had enough? My argument is that the only way to do that is to show up. I think what Brandon is saying, it's provide the solution, try to engage the center, and if necessary, show up. I think these are all viable options, but I just feel like the clock is ticking.
Americans don't like to lose, so you tell them how to win the next war, and bringing people home and letting the other part of the world sort themselves out with aid from us if necessary. But we have our own problems here. Russia acts for the families of Russia, and China acts against the people of China, but for China. And the U.S. acts against its people and its polity, the nation as such.
Yep.
So we need to convince people that you should have a government that acts for you and your people. And if you don't, you should remove them forcefully from the positions of power that they hold and redistribute that power with immediacy.
That's what we're going to have to do. I mean, the question is just how we do it.
By any means necessary. Because it's the only solution to our problems.
Well, I mean,
or we're always pushing.
Okay, let me take it further.
Yeah.
How long before it's obvious that the government failed?
Ha, Christ.
That's actually the question, right?
Well,
We've been acting, at least I have.
The data next year, meaning the data is a year time. So right now they are delinquent, right? But you will know next year when the numbers come out.
And then it takes some time for the people to get there, right? So my problem is I've been working for 20 years to stop that from happening. And what I've learned, because I'm a fucking idiot, is that you can't do anything until the Overton window's and it's over everybody and no one has other choice, right?
Want to pull on? We have two windows now.
Say that again.
We have two separate windows now.
Yeah.
We're getting there. There's one place for solutions. It's right here.
We have the only solution, but we have the only. You need a population who's given up the illusion that they can do it, that they can maintain the status quo.
Right. That they can avoid solving.
They can
We don't
avoid.
have a status quo anymore.
Well, excuse me. We have an insurrectionist movement called Marxism Postmodern Neo-Marxism Woke, which is led by the Jews the Ashkenazi Jews bringing Bolshevism here, transferring Bolshevism from a class issue to a race issue, using the blacks as the Bolsheviks used the working class Russians. In other words, it's important. They use the working class Russians against the aristocracy. They're using the blacks and now the Hispanics against the aristocracy in order to in both cases, position the Jewish priesthood as the dominant elites in the system. We saw what happened in Russia. We're going to see what's happening here. I think that we're ending up in the same position Russia did, which is it ended up causing a world war. The Jews coming here are weakening our power, weakening our civilization is going to result in a world war. So I mean, the problem is, how do you, it's like everybody says, well, it's the Jews are the problem. Well, the Jews are the carrier of the strategic group evolutionary strategy of weaponizing the female means of institutional warfare and cultural warfare, again, which is just a novelty because we've never had a Jewish civilization actually able to bring it into fruition. We've only had an Islamic civilization able to bring it into fruition. So the problem is that we've built our European civilization for what's become a ritualistic form of warfare, which is warfare between the aristocracy for control of territories, which is basically business. We've ritualized that warfare when the rest of the world still practices total war, meaning war against culture, against institutions, against capital, against knowledge, against ruling classes. The rest of the world still practices it. What we thought was we could use technology to actually conquer everybody else without converting to total war. Well, you can't. And what did the Ashkenazi Jews came here with their Bolshevism post-war, and they took advantage of the hole in our system. All we're saying is we'll plug the hole in the system, the problem goes away, right? The hole in the system's fixable, which is the suppression of this means of warfare by converting the West back from ritualistic warfare that is only useful for internal management of power structures, basically a market for power, and restoring us to total war, which is the defensive capital of every kind of capital that we have, right? So social, political capital, environmental capital, economic capital, institutional capital, et cetera, knowledge capital, and genetic capital. We have to defend all that capital because everybody else conducts total war, and we thought that our technological advantage could preserve we didn't even think it. We operated under the illusion that our technological advantage was enough. Right, because we never considered that technological advantage wasn't enough. Because technological advantage was so superior. We had the superior religion, we had a superior science and technology, a superior means of accounting, a superior means of law, superior means of administration. We had all these superiorities at once, despite being, 15% of the globe. So the problem is, with all those superiorities, we thought we could get away with preserving our tradition, but our tradition is ritualistic warfare, which is what we eventually end up with the human rights, right? Instead of total war, which is what every other fucking culture presents, especially Islam and Judaism, with Christianity to some degree, which is specifically a warfare against institutional cultural production, because the civilizations that conduct warfare that way are so low trust that they can't organize a military that will bear costs. Was that enough of a rant? Did I go off too far there? I think I went too far there. Anyway. Okay, we've been on here way too long. Did we make sense today?
Yeah, we went over important things and around in a circle because it's closed. The answer is the one we've got, and if we don't implement it, we face extinction as a peoples. And people are coming to that conclusion from every arena, not just ours. But the conclusion that we need something different to save our people it's everywhere. And we're offering the means to save all peoples. the way they are and persist their cultures the way they would like to.
Yeah, just do it truthfully.
It's a gift.
Well, I mean, all our sciences are a gift. This is just our most recent science. Problem is, it's a fucking difficult one.
Huh.
You know, because it's the one that requires us.
Yeah.
To the most behavioral modification. Because we all developed our traditions, norms, values just out of geographic accident. Right? That's what happened. And so we had geographic accidents. We only discovered ours because of geographic accident. Right?
We discovered natural law by being under the most pressure by natural law.
Yeah, that's true.
The world is pressuring everybody into it right now. The constraints are just a different set.
Yep.
And we're trying to convince people to get out ahead of it because it's less catastrophic that way.
All right, guys. I'm not gonna. We're done. We got to be done because I'm fried. I had three other points to cover. We'll cover next week.
That's good.
Was everybody okay? I'm feeling guilty for going on so long. Is this okay?
Oh,
we're good. You can kill the recording.
Okay. Okay, wait a minute. So everyone, to the audience, thank you for listening. This is all of us from the Institute of Natural Law. Thank you.